Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. A strong wind blows debris between abandoned, dilapidated buildings that decades ago stood beautifully and majestically among the cliffs protecting the city from storms and tempests. The island was located several kilometers from the shore, so finding it without knowing where to look was very difficult. But still, the traveler felt that the hand of a marauder had been here. Everything that the messengers of the hidden villages could not take away was dragged by treasure hunters. A short laugh flew along the wind. Further along the dead street, many of these scoundrels paid for their greed with their lives. Their pain and agony were clearly felt in the atmosphere of this place. Yes, our ancestors knew how to leave surprises for unexpected guests. A beautiful legacy, a kingdom of peace and quiet. The man dropped to one knee, raking dirt from the road with his palm. He clenched his fingers into a fist, watching as a thin strip of dust and ash returned to its dead womb. When I die, I will know where to spend the rest of eternity. This room was untouched by time. It was surprising, but knowing who built everything and owned these places, most questions were removed. There was nothing left here, only one bookcase and a table with a chair, next to which a skeleton without some of its ribs lay on the floor. Its head was adorned with a bandana with a hidden leaf symbol. Strange. The man leaned over and wanted to touch him, but stopped himself in time. He made a gesture with his hands and an exact copy of him emerged from the smoke next to him. The clone touched the protector without fear and immediately the white bones flashed blue, moving onto the duplicate's limb. The shinobi saw a ligature of symbols pass along the copy's neck to his head. He grimaced and disappeared with a pop, leaving behind a haze and unpleasant moments of crushing pain throughout his body. A spatial trap. The guy chuckled, not even wanting to imagine where the body part and organs could have been thrown, given the imagination of his relatives. Oh, I should have found out more details from Mommy. Sitting down at the table and putting his feet up on it, the man pulled down his hood, running his hand through his short blonde hair. His gaze fell on one of the drawers, which had a burnt spiral pattern instead of a handle. A chakra flame lit up his index finger, and he touched the whirlpool symbol. Ha! Inside was a rectangular hat that all the powers that be liked so much. Naruto twirled it in his hands and put it on, leaning back in his chair. Kage of a dead village in the middle of the ocean. His laughter echoed throughout the residence. I'm home. The last year has been a real test for everyone who was at least somewhat initiated into the secrets of the Biju. Jinchuriki were forbidden to leave the walls of their native villages until the situation stabilizes and the culprits are found. The Kage Council, which met 6 months ago, did not bring the results that everyone expected. The beasts with 3 and 4 tails were lost, so mist and stone were sitting on pins and needles, even though these Biju were not sealed, but simply hid on their territory. Minato looked up at the ceiling. So much had changed in 6 years, most notably his own family. Kagami had long since become a jonin, training genin and disappearing on missions. 2 years after Naruto left and there was no news from him, she left her home, settling down with this Kishio Uchiha. He heard rumors about the engagement, but his old friend, Fugaku, avoided a direct answer. He no longer had the same influence on his daughter. Although everything happened as planned, the girl went to the family of fanbearers. Kushina cooled off after fulfilling her promise. Her son turned away from them, and she blamed her husband for it. Yes, they continued to live together, but there was no longer trust and those feelings. Namikaze even turned a blind eye to the dirty gossip about his wife that his whisperers sometimes reported. He did not want to be disingenuous, because he himself had not always been faithful. Especially now, when so many problems had fallen on his head and the accumulated stress demanded an outlet. And he was grateful to all the true and false gods for only one thing, that Kushina correctly understood his concern for her life. After all, everyone who was initiated into the secrets of the Jinchuriki knew that after extraction, the carrier dies. There was a gentle knock on the door and after permission was given, a girl entered the room. Did you want something? Minato glanced at Hinata Hyuga, who had turned from a girl into the first beauty of not only the clan, but the entire land of fire. He pretended to study the document so that his ward would not think anything unnecessary. Problems with Hayashi were not part of Namikaze's plans. The girl's bold style had changed little over the past time. The same light jacket and mesh tank top underneath, only now there was a short top that covered her round, toned breasts from prying eyes. White breeches hugged her hips and did not hinder her quick movements. She did not wear a vest, although she had been a jonin for a couple of years. Here's the mission report. Hinata placed a scroll on the table, followed by 3 cards that lay next to her in her hand. And I want to propose my guys for the exam. Are they ready? A smile split Yandame's face, revealing the first wrinkles around his mouth. He looked up from the sheet of paper, pretending to do so for the first time during their short dialogue. Better than we did in our time, Hyuga replied calmly, but Minato caught the barb in her words perfectly. Well, she wasn't the first to blame him for decisions made out of pride. How are things in Suna? The man decided to change the subject so as not to press on sore spots. People are already accepting us more calmly, although slight discomfort is felt. In the end, as predicted, they came to terms with those conditions. Conflict situations have been reduced to a minimum. Hinata looked away, behind the Hokage. I described more details in the report. I see. Namikaze exhaled, leaning back in his chair. I'll think about what you said. Go. Hokage-sama. Hyuga spoke up near the exit, turning her head. Have you heard from him? You're free, Hinata, rest. The journey from Suna was long. Eat. It was dark and damp, a draft was blowing through the tunnels, but this did not bother the locals at all. There were 2 of them. On the table in front of them was a game board, the figures on which had frozen many hours ago. They were silent, each listening to a melody known to them. The sound of breaking drops gave way to the howling of the wind, and then, from afar, came the sound of the surf. It was beautiful. It was disgusting. It was better than the eternal game of hide-and-seek. We are not prisoners here. One of them suddenly spoke, leaning forward so that the firelight would cast his silhouette out of the darkness. His swamp-colored hair reached his shoulders and was unkempt, framing a rough face covered with scars. His left eye was closed and would likely never see the light of day again, for in its place was a terrible but long-healed wound. It was as if a bird of prey had grabbed his face with its claws, wanting to blind him. You can't call this freedom either. His interlocutor seemed enormous even while sitting. His shoulders were broad, and his muscles were so large that even his neck was lost from view against their background. A thick black beard hid half of his face, but what stood out most were his amber eyes. In the darkness, they seemed to burn with fire, burning through anyone they looked at. You know where the exit is. There are no guards and no chains. The scars on his face stretched as he smiled. But you won't escape. You're too talkative. I would never have thought. The fingers touched the figure and moved it, resuming the game that had long since cooled down. The same rules? The man looks into the living fire, but is not afraid of it. The flame does not go out, but it cannot gain full strength, surrounded by dark waters. An eternal struggle that was never destined to end. And again there is silence, but it does not press on the nerves, but calms them. The game has no end. The nights in Cloud were some of the most beautiful in the world. Those who had ever been lucky enough to visit this hidden village could see with their own eyes not only the dark sky so close, strewn with myriads of stars that one could touch them with one's fingers, but also the decorations on all the streets, shimmering with various soft colors. Something similar could only be found in AIM, because only these 2 villages were able to harness the forces of nature and direct them to a good cause. Electricity, which in many places was considered a luxury, was something ordinary here. And that is why visitors might think that the village was preparing for a big holiday. Light live music, which flowed like a spring from the open doors of many establishments, pleasantly warmed the ear. The soul became cheerful. I wanted to smile and have fun, forgetting about my worries at least for a while. Peace. Yes, this word perfectly described what Kumo brought to its residents in the evening, despite its reputation as a conservative village, where everyone was chasing strength. He valued and respected only it. He did not hesitate to demonstrate it to others, even if they were weaker. 2 sides of the same coin. It hurt, infuriated, and drove him crazy, but each Reikage understood that it was necessary to value peaceful times, to give their people prosperity and peace, because, after all, the shinobi profession already took a lot of feelings and emotions, leaving many with only an emptiness in their chests that could no longer be filled with anything. The girl walked slowly, enjoying the unobtrusive noise of the busy street. She liked her home, where she was born and raised. For him, she became a shinobi. For him, she accepted the monster that sowed death and chaos wherever he appeared. She swore to be loyal only to this place and to die for it if the situation required it, turning into a monster that became a prisoner in the body of a little girl, taking the lives of enemies. But history loves to distort facts, covering them with myths and fables, because even a Biju can see in a person something more than just a vessel for his power and a cage. Boring. Two-Tailed purred, yawning and drawing out the word. Let's have some fun, huh, Yujito? You've heard Reikage-sama's order very well and I have no intention of disobeying it. Ni bowed her head slightly in greeting to her acquaintances. She was loved and respected not only for her strength, but also for the fact that she selflessly agreed to accept the tailed beast. The girl had heard that in other villages, most often, Jinchuriki were not held in high esteem by people. They were feared, and their powers were feared. They tried to keep their distance. And this caused her burning indignation, because a person bore this burden of responsibility for their sake, and in return received only nothing but negativity. But in Kumo, everything was different. And Yujito was immensely happy about this. You don't want to, do you? The cat stretched in her cage, arching her graceful back. But I know you're bored. Shut up. Nia's cheeks flushed slightly as she remembered the face of the guy she had met about a year ago. He was a shinobi, as she knew, since he had never told her. A rare, but for some reason welcome guest at the Reikage residence. Shut up, shut up, shut up! Not even remember that night? Biju drew out the vowels, enjoying the embarrassment of his jailer. Yes, that's right, and Nikomata never hid it. She helped, gave strength for free, but she was still a prisoner, and she never tired of reminding him of it. His strong hands and gentle touches. After all, women of your profession often lack them? I just hate you, stupid cat! Yujito was no longer walking down the street, but running towards her house across the rooftops, so that people wouldn't see her in such a state. Yes, she had acted like a simpleton back then, succumbing to the charm and charisma of this guy. Ni blushed even more and closed her eyes, being in another long jump. He was 8 years younger. Gods! She was an amorous fool, no other way. But only next to him did she feel weak. His chakra gave off something familiar and was warm, wrapping her in a soft blanket. Next to him, she simply could not be a jonin and Jinchuriki of Kumogakure no Sato, only Ni Yujito. Nikomata lay down and closed her eyes, yawning infectiously. Without any embarrassment, she was drowning in the feelings and thoughts of her little jailer. And this should have scared the Biju, but it only became interesting. Not many in the world are given to see what she can do. And the two-tailed had never seen a person who would wear the Shinigami's marks on themselves, as proof. However, the cat never liked to ponder strange questions for hours on end, preferring improvisation and spontaneous surprises. After all, no matter what happens, with or without Yujito, she will continue to have fun. Bigger, stronger, faster. A single swing of the blade outlined an arc and immediately disappeared into the scabbard that rested on a wide black belt. The wooden pole stood for a few more long seconds and began to move in different directions, cut into 5 pieces. One hand movement for others, a magnificent brushwork for him. Before, his arsenal was shuriken and kunai. Then ninjutsu burst into life. And only the wise Sannin, giving him a kick in the ass, said that this is not all. A shinobi must be able to do a lot, even without chakra and his own weapon. Any training is a step forward. It is easy to stand still when you think that the limit has been reached. It is much harder to see the road where there could not be one. Sasuke exhaled, catching his breath after hours of training with a katana. Orochimaru had been supervising his training for a couple of years, saying that it was just another experiment, but Uchiha saw the truth. The scientist simply wanted to share as much experience and strength as possible, as if he sensed something approaching. Anyone could ask, but not everyone would dare, knowing the reputation of the Sannin. 1 week of training with this shinobi gave more than half a year under the supervision of a family. Yes, you can be a genius of the Sharingan, but what good is it if the enemy is more experienced than you? He sees weaknesses where others are strong. And Orochi did not hesitate to prove it time after time, bringing Sasuke to a bloody cough. For which he was grateful to him, and even upset when the Sannin finished his training, citing that there was nothing more to teach. A poorly hidden lie, but the Uchiha did not impose himself, simply thanking him for the time spent, which caused an approving nod, and he could swear that then the scientist smiled the most ordinary, good-natured smile, and not the usual grin. There is no limit to perfection, right? Sasuke lazily turned towards the voice. He had sensed it about 10 minutes ago, but he didn't want to interrupt just to say hello. Long time no see, white-eyed. The corners of his lips twitched, because after his family there was no one closer to him. Take away that nasty grin, Uchiha, you could have written at least once. Hinata came out of the shadow of the tree, heading towards her friend. No more, no less. This was agreed upon a long time ago, when both realized that their relationship could go further than allowed, if he crawled out of the snake hole more often. It's better in it than a mouth full of sand and hellish heat. And I told the Hokage to send you with me. Hyuga muttered and extended her hand in greeting. Did you at least miss me? If not, then better lie. Sasuke remained silent, tilting his head to the side like a bird. Freak. You're so cute when you're angry. Hyuga misses Uchiha. If I tell anyone, they'll laugh, the guy responded with a handshake, and then touched the girl's forehead with 2 fingers. You know everything perfectly well, so why are you asking? Just. The wind ruffled her long black hair, and Sasuke flinched when Hinata buried her head in his chest to hide the range of emotions that was displayed on her face. I'm trying to understand if he misses us? I think we'll only know when we see him and ask him in person. Hyuga perked up, and Uchiha read the thirst for answers in her eyes. Smiling, he stroked Hinata's hair with his hand, as he had done many times before. The privilege of being a best friend gave a lot. Orochimaru made a promise not long ago. Can you spare me this drama, huh? The girl hissed angrily, pinching Sasuke's cheek. Oh, okay. I haven't really tried to find out anything yet, but as far as I understand, Naruto has become the head of AIM. The night was beautiful. The sky was clear, without a single star on it, only a bright crescent moon unexpectedly brightly illuminated the earth. The weather changed. The rain stopped exactly on the day when Nagato stepped over the main entrance to the village, leaving it. As if it took with it all the melancholy and tears that the inhabitants of the unfortunate country had shed for years. And the past, theirs and their own, which darkened their thoughts, not allowing old wounds to heal completely. Naruto chuckled weakly. He had changed too. Maybe not radically, but greatly. Just like the entire world, which was already beginning to be covered by the storm. Slowly, as Nagato had predicted, and irreversibly. It was too obvious to turn a blind eye to the facts. Countries were trying to unite to survive the coming storm, forgetting about squabbles and past grievances. They were preparing, but they did not know where to expect the blow from. And, most importantly, from whom. I know what you want. I've seen people like you. A male voice distracted Uzumaki from his thoughts, and he turned around. The man looked pitiful. Torn clothes hung in rags, bruises and abrasions covered part of his face, which was not hidden by his dark bangs, as well as his bare chest. But it was a small price to pay, considering what he experienced at the very beginning. An empty look, without meaning or purpose, just sowing fear and destruction. You are what people fear so much. The other side of a shinobi's power. Spare me your moralizing. Naruto took off his cloak and threw it on an empty chair, and he himself took another, putting it back forward, leaning on it with his forearms. Do you think you can see right through people? I'll disappoint you, but you know nothing about me, and your pathetic attempt to get into my soul looks disgusting. You are just a cog in the machine, destined to perform one role, not knowing what others are doing. What do you want from me? The man looked away, unable to look into the cold blue eyes that were watching him intently, without blinking. I don't need you, only what's inside. Naruto used his fingers to pull the fabric of his torso aside, revealing his stomach, where the seal tattoo was still visible. The lock that held the doors of the ancient creature's prison. So it's you. I thought you understood right away. The chair was thrown aside. I promise, it will hurt a lot, Yudakata. Uzumaki's palm flashed blue and he swiped it from side to side several times, leaving a trail of chakra in the air. After all, I'm not a master yet. The rays of light had just appeared in the windows, but life in the village was already in full swing. The boy walked slowly through the streets, not paying attention to the people scurrying around. Again strange dreams, again cold sweat and a wet bed from the horrors that were happening there. These were not fantasies, but not his own memories either. He was a jailer, but it felt like everything was the other way around. The prisoner drove him crazy, brought him to hysterics, never shutting up, never giving him any concessions, whenever he had the chance. The seal was weakening, no need to ask others to understand this, and with it the monster was gaining will. But he was in no hurry, waiting for the most vulnerable time of day, when his eyes were stuck together from fatigue and his mind asked for rest, so as not to completely lose the ability to think sensibly. Sleep was the most terrible time for the Jinchuriki of Shikaku. Gaara! The guy froze in place, turning around in search of the person who called him. You don't look well. Kankuro landed next to him, raising dust. He didn't have his doll with him, although Temari sometimes joked about how her brother wouldn't leave her even in bed. Mother's worried. Yes. Gaara looked at him with a heavy, sleepy gaze. I didn't mean to. Has it started again? It wasn't the first time Kankuro had seen those bruises under his eyes. His younger brother's exhausted face spoke louder than any words. And it made him fear for his mental health, because if the bijou were to gain freedom. The boy didn't want to think about it, believing that there was some way out of the situation, but neither the elders, nor, especially, his father, could give answers. They had a technique to seal, but no one knew how to strengthen it to protect the life of the Jinchuriki. There were no masters left, and asking Konoha about it. No one would ever dedicate the leaf to such personal matters of Suna. And Kankuro understood that even if Gaara was on the verge, nothing would change. I can handle it. Shikaku's bearer smiled wearily. After all, the previous Jinchuriki was able to live with him until old age. On the outskirts of the village, in a cell and completely alone. The puppeteer hissed in an angry patter. I don't want such a fate for you. And if necessary, everything will be fine. His younger brother assured him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know, One-Tailed feels that something is about to happen. Something so important that no one will be left out. And what's good about that? This bijou is completely insane, it's only attracted to blood. Who knows, Kankuro? The scarlet dawn illuminated the entire village, tearing it out of the shadows. A bad sign. Who knows? Rain was not uncommon in these places, as well as snow. Life among the mountains had its advantages, but also brought some inconveniences. For ordinary people, and they were rare guests here, as were shinobi. Few knew about this plateau, which stretched out 10 kilometers from Kumo. Beautiful and picturesque enough to rest the soul. And very large, well suited for training, to rest the body. The man lay under the canopy of a wooden veranda. The small drops that occasionally fell on his skin due to the wind's mischief did not at all prevent him from enthusiastically writing in a small notebook. Another rhyme was especially successful, and a satisfied grin appeared on his lips. This day was not starting out so badly. Excellent morning, the lines fly do not crawl, today I am especially cool. The man jumped up in place, making wave-like movements with his hands in front of him. His swords lay nearby and did not interfere with the movements of the owner. Short white hair was combed back and held in place with a bandana, on which the symbol of the cloud was depicted. Killer B was wearing only dark pants, not at all embarrassed that he was not the one here. This is the first and last time B. Yujito lay next to him in a hammock that had been stretched between the beams. Next time, your students will follow you. Sitting in one place has finished me off, and the Raikage's gloomy face has gotten on my nerves. He fell to the floor again, leaning on it with his hands. Ni was curious about what her brother was thinking, but his face was expressionless, and his eyes were hidden behind black glasses. Jinchuriki. She understood Killer like no one else. And when he left Kumo against the Isama's orders, Yujito knew that it was not a whim or pampering. That was how B wanted to show that he was not a small child who needed to be protected from any danger. Strong, and even very strong, he was probably the only one who could compete with the Raikage. And he needed to be locked up. More likely other people from him. Ni smiled, thinking about how she had gotten herself into this adventure. You like little Uzumaki so much? Killer continued to study the valley, flooded with rain. What, excuse me? Yujito tried to hide her surprise. Although she herself did not know to the end what was more discouraging, the name given or the question itself. It's the last thing I should do to interfere in your life, but do you know who you want? B glanced at her lightly, clearly seeing how little his friend knew about the named person. He's the son of the Hokage. The head of the rain. The list is impressive, should I continue? How do you know everything? Ni tried to remember where she had screwed up in public. After all, every look, every touch of hers happened unnoticed by others, more often in private. The girl sighed and smiled sadly. How naive it was to think that one of the most important kunoichi would be overlooked or allowed to hang out with just anyone. At that very moment, she understood even better why B couldn't sit still, constantly disappearing somewhere. Hiding from prying ears and enjoying the peace and solitude. But now, although I can guess. So you just wanted to talk about it. You know yourself I want you to be happy. The man stood up, leaning his shoulder against the wooden beam. He understood perfectly well that it was none of his business. The guy was strong, smart, but he was an outsider, and would hardly ever be able to become one of them. For him. B knew in detail what had happened then, 6 years ago, at the exam. Good guys died, and his student could have followed them if his brother had not intervened. This caused hostility towards the man, even without really knowing him personally. Biased, yes, because they are all shinobi and are always on the edge of a knife, but some things simply cannot be forgiven. Especially a girl who forgot about the path of a shinobi and became disabled. Are you sure that you are on the same path with him? I don't know, Yujito answered honestly, her gaze wandering over the ceiling boards. It's hard to say. Every time I learn something new about him from other people. Why doesn't he tell me himself? Is he hiding it for some reason, or does he just not want me to see him as an enemy? I don't know, B, but I've never felt so good with someone. I'll keep an eye on him at the tournament, Killer said unexpectedly seriously and without rhyme, which caused his girlfriend to laugh loudly. Then I'm following you. This time, I want the participants to be closely watched at all stages. Minato glanced at all the assembled shinobi. Among the Jonin instructors, white-masked A and BU were visible, his personal guard, who acted in the shadows. Namikaze really didn't want to repeat the previous exam. So much energy had been lost to re-establish relations with Mist and Cloud that he didn't want to remember. No one said it outright, but the tension was felt even at the Kage Council. No need to get into every fight, just keep unnecessary casualties to a minimum. Dismissed. The fourth closed his eyes, listening to the whisper of voices. He urgently needed a vacation, or better yet, to resign as Hokage. But there was no successor in sight. No, he once thought about one of the Uchiha, but recent years have shown that they are not such friends. If only Naruto were here, Kushina, Kagami stay. Once everyone was out, the wife and daughter allowed themselves to relax and sit down. Minato hid his smile behind intertwined fingers. They hadn't gotten together like this for a long time. Did something happen, father? The girl was an exact copy of her mother, as all her friends constantly told her. And looking at her, Namikaze remembered his youth. Naruto is probably his spitting image now. Yes. Yandame thought for a couple of seconds. This concerns Naruto. Is he okay? Kushina jumped up from her seat, placing her palms on the tabletop. She looked into her husband's eyes so intently that he was even confused for a while. His wife had not expressed her emotions so strongly for a long time. Come on, don't be silent. I think so, after all, he is now the main one in AIM. Nagato. Kushina breathed out, immediately thinking of the worst option. She loved her brother, even if he had long ago crossed her out of his heart. I don't know. The Hokage shook his head. There's too little information, but he'll come here. Kagami finished for him. The rain is involved for a reason, right? Oh, that naughty little brother. Did Naruto contact you somehow, Minato? The letter arrived this morning. Namikaze nodded, handing Kushina the scroll. She needed it more than anything in the world. And he himself will appear the day after tomorrow. The alcohol was excellent, so Naruto didn't let his cup go empty. Once upon a time, when talking to Nagato for the first time, he highly praised the local drink. And he was right, or maybe the Uzumaki just have the same tastes. The guy smiled and started on the hot food that had just been served. The journey was short, but exhausting. There were almost no stops, despite the fatigue of the genins, who could only stubbornly move forward. They were now resting in their rooms with their mentor, wanting to wash away their fatigue with hot water and simply fall asleep. The food was finished, the bottle was quickly empty, and now Naruto was simply enjoying the silence of this establishment, shrouded in semi-darkness. He knew very well that his solitude would not last long, so he tried to squeeze the most out of the time he had. "And you are tactful enough to not interrupt my meal." Uzumaki leaned back in his chair, studying the crystal chandelier that emitted a soft light. A conversation with this man was bound to happen, which is why he wanted to avoid it. The guest was unpleasant to the young head of AIM, but Naruto understood perfectly well what drove the thoughts of the old pragmatist. Perhaps in 50 years, he would be no better. Seeing the worst-case scenario everywhere, considering everyone he met an enemy, and achieving results only through harsh methods. "You haven't been home for so long." Danzo emerged from the darkest corner, as if he had been there from the start. Uzumaki merely closed his eyes and gestured to the empty space. This man's job was to nip threats in the bud, to be everywhere and know everything. To deceive, to blackmail, to kidnap and kill. Shimura was the root of the darkness, doing the most vile work. The filth that many would never undertake. And if the Hokage was Konoha's shield, then Danzo was its blade. He didn't care who stood before him, a child, an old man or a woman. If they were expected to be a threat, they had to die. Therefore, it is only fair to let you enjoy his cordiality and hospitality. "Spare me your chant, old man." Naruto chuckled, listening to the measured tapping of his cane on the wooden floor. The uninvited guests sat down at the table, and only then did they look at him. Blue eyes met black ones, trying to read their interlocutor before the conversation even started. This was an important aspect to set the right direction for the conversation. "You look like shit. Are you busy at work? An exam is always a risk." Shimura smiled dryly, stretching the wrinkles on his face. In recent years, he felt especially strongly that old age and stormy youth were taking their toll. His main weapon, which had saved not only his life but also the entire leaf hundreds of times, was losing its former sharpness. Small but important details began to elude him more and more often. More mistakes appeared that could become fatal in the future. Trusted people especially helped to cope, but Danzo knew he needed a successor. A person to whom he could entrust the work of a lifetime and calmly retire. There were candidates, but such a decision could not be rushed. And risk gives birth to danger. In my business, any miscalculation can be the last. And it is good if only for me. Have you come to complain about your fate? Uzumaki's lips twitched in a smile, which quickly disappeared. But I'm not interested. Save small talk for old friends. How's AIM? Shimura placed the cane in front of him, placing both palms on it and lowering his chin on top. Is it worth it? With your prayers? Naruto shrugged. Was it hard to set Akatsuki and Hanzo against each other? Question-answer? After thinking for a few seconds, the guy nodded. Both forces were dangerous for Konoha, so they had to be weakened. Some were a mental bookmark, some were a bribe. A long matter, but not difficult. Saying it in such a tone as if you were discussing the weather. That's you, isn't it? It doesn't matter what others think or say. My job is to leave no trace, but to make the consequences tangible to the enemy. Shimura leaned forward. And if not me, then who? Naruto had no answer, because the old man in front of him was absolutely right. Such a life breaks the weak of spirit. For this job you need to have a lot of darkness in your heart. And who knows what price Shimura himself paid for his service to the leaf. A snake, a toad, and a slug. Danzo continued, studying the boy's face closely. You can read emotions from facial expressions, and intentions from emotions. That's what he was taught. They want to change the lake? Oh, Uzumaki exhaled. It's the same as if a root suddenly wanted to become the trunk of a tree. The old man's eyes widened after a moment as the meaning of what had been said sank in. But he quickly pulled himself together, considering all the options. And what will the lizard do? Naruto lowered his head, looking at the empty plate. You're not playing by the rules, old man. I know how to be grateful. Danzo grinned, squinting. The hunters won't try to make new leather boots out of the poor reptile. Uzumaki laughed softly. Now he was especially sorry that the bottle in front of him was empty. The lizard will wait until the victim falls down exhausted from the poisonous bite. The cane hit the floorboard and Shimura stood up. We understood each other perfectly. He said these words already standing with his back to his interlocutor. Hiding in the darkness of the hall, Danzo turned around, casting a heavy and long look at the guy. You could have become a strong root for the tree. It's just a pity that you have practically no love for it. We understood each other perfectly. Uzumaki mimicked him, and a second later the chakra of the head of the secret division disappeared. The sun was shining brightly on Konoha. The house was filled with all sorts of food smells. It was a special day, so everything had to be top-notch. Homey, loving, so that everyone at the table felt like family again. At least for a while. Kushina had not left the stove for hours. The clones that could have helped her greatly were not summoned. The woman wanted to do everything with her own hands, putting all her feelings and emotions into cooking. Oh, she was happy, excitement mixed with joy, seasoned with hope. Kushina dreamed of everything returning to normal, driving away gloomy thoughts. The time spent apart was bound to make everyone think hard and draw conclusions. It couldn't be otherwise because they... Family, the woman said contentedly, taking the meat out of the oven and putting a poppy seed pie in its place. Naruto loved it, although he never showed it. Tastes could change, so Kushina made different dishes, even specifically learned a few recipes that were especially popular in AIM. A light knock on the door made her start and freeze, listening to the sensations. But there was no chakra, so the yandame's wife sighed, heading for the door. For the first few seconds, she couldn't get over the sight of young Minato on the doorstep. Except that his hair was very short, and his eyes were a darker shade. The guy on her doorstep didn't blink, studying his mother's face, although she hadn't changed much. Hello, Mom. These words sounded like a bolt from the blue. Kushina's legs buckled, but she managed to stand. Her hands trembled, and tears appeared in the corners. Yes, she imagined how this meeting would happen. Yes, she rehearsed what she would say. But just 2 words destroyed all her plans. Naruto. The wooden spatula that was in her hand shattered into pieces, hitting the top of Uzumaki's head. Fool! Was it really so difficult to write at least once in 6 years? She swung her hand, and Naruto prepared himself for more beatings. But Kushina simply pulled her son to her and hugged him tightly, not wanting to let go, as if he was the last thread to salvation from death. You fool, we were so worried. I know, was all Naruto could answer, allowing himself to hug his mother. He felt the full range of emotions she was experiencing, and a stupid smile appeared on her face of its own accord. Time had changed him, but the echoes of the past would never be able to let go. Come in, the others will arrive soon. Minato was honestly in a hurry to get home, but his job required him to be there almost every minute. He simply created shadow clones to sort out papers and cancelled all the meetings planned for today, ignoring everything. No matter how the day ended, he simply needed to rest. With his family, if possible. Namikaze might seem indifferent to this matter, but inside he always felt a cramp in his organs when it came to his children and wife. And, as luck would have it, many people constantly reminded him of this. On purpose, no doubt, seeing how the fourth was literally aging before his eyes under the weight of the decisions he had made. There was a conversation behind the door and Minato froze, listening. Most likely, his appearance in the house would hardly go unnoticed, but nevertheless, he needed to take a shower and tidy himself up. Namikaze seriously doubted that he could look presentable sleepy, with a light stubble. Taking a deep breath, the man entered the kitchen, receiving 3 glances. Hello, Kagami? The fourth quickly appeared next to him, and kissed his daughter on the top of her scarlet hair. Kushina, 1 step and he hugged his wife, inhaling her scent. It intoxicated and excited the blood, only now Minato thought how much he loved his wife, and it was unlikely that he would ever be able to love someone as much. We'll do without kissing. Uzumaki smiled, offering his hand. His father's blue eyes studied him carefully, trying to note every change on his face. The small scars were almost invisible, but Namikaze knew very well that such things appeared on any user of the capricious air. Their two palms touched. The man felt the strength and hard skin with old calluses. Barely noticeable scars from fire and lightning techniques covered the back of the hand, and Minato was sure that Naruto's body still had traces of life outside of Konoha. His son had long since ceased to be the child who, holding back tears, refused to be a shinobi. "I'm very glad to see you, Naruto." Namikaze pulled him easily, and the boy did not resist. His father hugged him around the neck with one arm. "You've become strong. Did your dreams come true?" Uzumaki asked quietly, but a loud slam on the table showed that Kushina had heard everything. "I'll rip your legs off," she growled, pulling her husband by the shirt and literally throwing him onto the chair. "Do you have to ruin everything when we were sitting so nicely?" "Sorry," said father and son at the same time, scratching the back of their heads. Kushina couldn't help but laugh, and Kagami followed suit. "Like father, like son," the girl said, clutching her stomach. "Now we have a full-fledged family dinner." She was silent for a moment, and all traces of mirth disappeared. "I miss this. I have to apologize for how things turned out." "No, Naruto, it's not your fault," Kushina realized, squeezing her son's palm with her fingers. But it couldn't be otherwise. The guy finished his sentence on an exhale, feeling his mother's fingers tighten. No one was in a hurry to resume the conversation, thinking about their own. "We've had plenty of time to think it over," Minato said thoughtfully, recalling everything that had preceded the split in their family. Many words were left unsaid, even more were superfluous, bringing their own terrible consequences. Namikaze thought about how their lives could have turned out if he had sacrificed his pride and principles at the time. It was enough to understand and make a decision. Uzumaki nodded in agreement, freeing his hand. He ran it over his face, collecting his thoughts. "The world around us began to change." "Are you talking about someone hunting Bichu?" Kushina looked at her husband, and then turned her gaze to Naruto, trying to understand what he was thinking. His whole appearance became terribly tired in 1 second. His eyes were directed at one point. "That too. It seems to be a tradition for our get-togethers to be like a wake." Kagami sighed heavily. "Why can't we just chat like a normal family about all sorts of nonsense? Naruto has been gone for 6 years, Mom has taken on a new genin team, Dad is preparing for the Chunin exams." The girl took a deep breath. "I'm expecting a child from Kishio." "What?" Kushina jumped up and rushed to her daughter, hugging her. "What time frame?" "I never liked this Uchiha," Naruto muttered. "And now I like his sister too." "Naruto!" Kushina hissed at her son, and then looked at her husband. "Well, what about you, Grandpa?" "Huh!" Namikaze came out of his stupor, blinking rapidly. "Will I have grandchildren?" "That's what happens sometimes when you don't keep an eye on your kids." Uzumaki giggled nastily, immediately dodging the thrown plate. Kushina now looked like a she-wolf protecting her offspring. "Hey! One more sharp remark from you and I'll kick you straight to aim, son!" Naruto stood up, smiling. This was probably how their family should have been, if things had been different. His chest ached unpleasantly at the thought that this idyll would last for such a short time. But the chain of events had already begun to move, and it could not be stopped. "We'll talk later," Uzumaki whispered as he passed his father and patted him on the shoulder. "Grandpa, it looks like it's time to get to know this Kishio better." The night was beautiful and deceptively calm. The bright light of the full moon occasionally broke through the dark clouds, tearing the village out of the shadows, allowing an experienced eye to spot shinobi, their faces hidden behind white masks, flickering in the alleys and on the rooftops. They patrolled the village, watching the exam guests from the darkness. They carried out their silent service for the good of Konoha. The girl leaned back on the clothes that were spread out, which were supposed to protect her from the cold of the ground. Heavy breathing escaped from her lips, swollen from kisses, and a slight blush was clearly visible on her tanned face. But she was not embarrassed by her nakedness, rather the long caresses gave away her thoughts so clearly. The predator inside her purred contentedly, basking in the emanations of her little jailer. It was hard to admit, but she liked this man. He was different from the others. His chakra had its own specific flavor. And his patron. The patterns on Nikomata's skin flared with a cold, otherworldly light, betraying her satisfaction. Riddles could wait. The Bijou easily penetrated the thoughts of the heated Kunoichi, passing off his desires as her own. It was not difficult, because here they were similar. Yujito rolled over and threw her leg over her lover, instantly being on top of him. Her blonde hair cascaded over her deceptively fragile shoulders, and her eyes glittered hungrily in the darkness. He was hers alone. A part of her. A drug and her greatest weakness. Right after Kumo. You're insatiable, aren't you? Her lips twitched in a smirk, and then she covered them with her own. The heat of her thighs scorched his skin, reigniting the smoldering passion. His mouth tasted of blood as she bit him, as if reproaching him for what he had said. They saw each other so rarely that it sounded like an insult. I'm sorry. Your apologies won't change anything. The girl didn't need his help, directing and setting the rhythm herself. A short moan could give away their location if someone dared to come here. The chakra of the three mixed into something stronger, scaring away unnecessary spectators. Those who dared to disturb their peace could only be sympathized with. A predator never misses its prey. Today you are mine! Dawn had just touched the treetops with its rays, and Naruto was already awake. His fingers were carefully drawing intricate patterns on the woman's back, wanting to wake her up as gently as possible. Yujito turned her head and opened one eye, smiling contentedly. She had long been accustomed to getting up early, but now she wanted to lie in his arms for as long as possible. She didn't want to go anywhere, nor did she want to let Uzumaki go, but she understood that he had responsibilities, and she would be scolded for her absence at night anyway. Knee stretched like a cat, seeing how blue eyes were watching her every move carefully. She playfully poked him in the chest, wrapping her clothes around herself. Stop staring like that! The girl blushed, trying to find her underwear. Some of it was found a few meters from their parking lot. From the outside, it might have seemed that Yujito had simply waved her hand and the thing she needed had appeared in her fingers. You weren't so fast last night. Naruto chuckled, rolling to the side in time to avoid being hit by a hot hand. Where did she get all that speed from? How I fell for this. The girl sighed regretfully, starting to get dressed. Please, no insults. I am an eligible bachelor after all. Oh, please forgive me, Naruto-sama. How could I hurt your sense of self-importance? I don't understand. Is it the time of day that changes you or all the girls? Uzumaki twirled his wrist in the air, trying to find the right words. A little off? He pushed off from the ground, flying for several dozen meters before landing on his father's head, which was carved into the rock. The view of Konoha from here was especially beautiful. There were still 3 days before the exam, so I could devote time to business. Naruto! Yujito's scream probably woke up half the village. Well, a morning jog has never killed anyone. Uzumaki shifted his body in time to avoid getting hit in the head. Right? He closed his eyes, trying to abstract himself from the world around him, to feel. What? Without knowing the answer himself, Kishio tried to understand what his fiancée's younger brother had come to. Uchiha had never told anyone what he had found in Naruto. Even Kagami didn't know, although she had tried many times to loosen her lover's tongue. But some words were too difficult. Kishio couldn't admit, first of all to himself, that his whole current life was just a farce. A formulaic game on the big stage of life. Clan, village, family. All of this was so close to his heart, but his mind understood that this was all not his. He was a black sheep among his brothers, a hermit whose only true friend was his father. And this strange, weak, despised boy, who proved to everyone that appearances are often deceiving, who disappeared many years ago, never sharing his friendship. The Uchiha flinched as if he'd been slapped in the face, as a disgusting thought formed in the back of his mind. Kagami is just a replacement. Shaking his head, Kishio chuckled. No, he loved her. Even more than his clan. And he was ready to give his life for her, if necessary. Do you know why summons don't teach all people senjutsu? His voice seemed to be carried by the wind. The Uchiha shuddered and opened his eyes, looking at the boy sitting only a meter away from him in amazement. To be so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't notice the man approaching. An unforgivable mistake for a shinobi of his level. No. Chakra. Naruto answered vaguely and fell silent, giving his interlocutor time to think about what he had heard. But he remained silent, not wanting to ask stupid questions. Uzumaki raised his eyelids, studying Kishio's face with changed eyes. For a second, the Uchiha thought that Naruto had sent too much chakra to them, but then he realized that it had nothing to do with it. The blue irises were almost lost against the light blue whites of the eyes, and the pupils had turned white. Chakra can tell about a person even more than he himself can. Chakra helps to understand who is worthy, and who does not even make sense to try. I don't understand. Orochimaru hasn't been able to get what he wants for decades. His chakra is strong, he himself is strong, but the snakes have been denying him his entire life. Uzumaki blinked, returning his eyes to normal. Because they see the imprint of evil in his chakra. But it sounds... What do you mean, complete nonsense? Naruto laughed, falling backwards. There's good and bad in each of us. Let's face it, with our profession, we've all gotten our hands dirty. But I'm talking about something else. When we're born, we're, let's say, subject to good or evil? Kishio finished skeptically, raising one eyebrow. You know, that's the weirdest greeting I've ever heard. What the hell are you doing here? Uzumaki raised himself on his elbow. Or how did you trick my sister? Ahem. Uchiha choked, pounding his fist on his chest. No, this is probably weirder. Naruto looked at Kishio seriously, as if trying to read his face. Or even look deeper. To reveal the most secret thing that should forever remain personal. The Uchiha felt uncomfortable under the weight of that gaze, but running away from problems was not his style. If Naruto wanted to tell him something about this, then he was ready. After all, they weren't going to fight here, were they? Kishio hoped so. Don't tense up so much. Naruto stood up and brushed the grass and dirt off his pants. He understood everything from the first second he saw the Uchiha. Few people could hide their feelings and emotions from him when he resorted to the art of the hermit. The guy in front of him loved sincerely, and with all his heart. The way only the Uchiha could. I already told you that you are the strangest representative of your clan? Yeah, it was. Kishio smiled widely, relaxing. He was genuinely happy to see this guy again after all these years. So you finally came home? Uzumaki's lips spread into a grin. He extended his hand to his interlocutor, inviting him to rise. We must not stop in our search. And at the end of it we will arrive at the same place where we started, and see it as if for the first time. Did you finally listen to me and start writing? Let's go, I need to visit someone else. And on the way I'll tell you a couple of stories and maybe I'll find out what Kagami saw in you. His eyes caught every movement, so it was easy to dodge, but still the enemy managed to surprise at times and took full advantage of it. A black lock of hair slowly fell to the ground, and his fingers found a short but noticeable cut on his cheek. This sparring sometimes went beyond what was allowed, and although everything could have been stopped with one word, both squeezed everything out of themselves in an attempt to become at least a drop, but stronger. The girl grinned, licking the drops of blood from her fingers. She was calculating and smart, but in these short moments she gave into the fighting spirit that was so unusual for her clan. Behind her back, many acquaintances compared the girl to the Hokage's wife, Kushina Uzumaki, because both were quick to speak, preferring to act. A short step towards her opponent, and she saw the red glint in his eyes, immediately responding in kind. The veins on her temples bulged, and the gray irises became several shades darker. The dojutsu finally entered the fight, because the Uchiha was getting too serious after the first blood. His blood. Sasuke disappeared in an instant, not giving Hinata time to come to her senses. Hyuga only dove to the side on instinct, so as not to be smashed into the ground. She was already preparing to use Whirlwind, when she realized that the Uchiha was still standing in the small crater left by the chakra emission. You know how much I don't like that. His voice was calm, but she could swear she could feel his anger from a distance. She smiled nervously, wondering if he would have stopped his attack if she hadn't reacted immediately. What do you mean, when your well-groomed face gets touched? White-eyed. Sasuke answered in a higher tone, but just as evenly, after which he slightly turned his head to the side. He had sensed his clansman's chakra a long time ago. It was quite specific, but there was something else, on the very border of perception, not sensory, but that very sixth sense, when someone stares at your back. What do you say? The hearth is well developed, most likely a jonin, but there is someone else. She fell silent, thinking about her words. He is like a spot, Hinata stuttered. I saw something similar during the exam. The Uchiha winced, turning completely towards the unexpected guests. First came the brunette with their clan symbol on his shoulders, followed by a guy who could easily be mistaken for the Yandame Hokage in his younger years. He ran his hand through his short blonde hair, sighing in disappointment. I told you that you don't know how to hide your chakra, Kishio. Naruto took a few steps forward, studying the faces of his former teammates. Naruto? Hinata's eyes widened and she sank to her knees, still not fully believing what was happening. Is it really you? You've been putting off the promised meeting for too long. Sasuke moved in immediately, delivering a punch to the stomach. There was a pop and the Uchiha found himself in white smoke. And you also said that my greetings are strange. Uzumaki's voice sounded from behind. He sat down next to Hyuga. Well, hello, princess. Naruto. Hinata hung on his neck, and tears of joy treacherously ran from her eyes. She should be strong, not show weakness, but now she simply could not hold back her emotions. Hush hush, or someone will see and misunderstand, the guy gently hugged her, throwing a sly glance at the Uchiha couple. Be jealous in silence, Sasuke, all the beauties are mine now. Idiot, Hyuga whispered. I absolutely agree with her. I think I'm the odd one out here, Kishio said, stepping back. No, what are you saying? You're a member of a family. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, demanding an explanation. Okay, 2 families. And yet, an instant jump to the side and Kishio disappeared from the training ground, leaving his friends alone. He won't blab, will he? Hinata wiped her eyes with her sleeve and stepped back, blushing more and more with each passing second. He's a grave, Naruto assured her and smiled. It brought back memories. They had grown, they had become stronger, they had made a name for themselves, but now, for just a moment, they were once again a team of genin, working together on low-ranking missions and training under the watchful eye of their master, perfecting their teamwork. Just a moment, but it was worth waiting for this meeting. I miss you. Uzumaki stood up, pulling Hinata along with him and holding out his hand to Sasuke. Uchiha didn't answer right away, also lost in his thoughts. Friends. They had been studying each other with their eyes for long minutes, which dragged on unbearably slowly. There was no point in breaking the silence. These two had known each other for so long that they understood everything without unnecessary words. They knew everything, starting from the moment of birth. And this was burdensome, because at the same time they were strangers. The girl behind her was eager to find out something, but she stopped herself every time. This meeting took place with her help, but on someone else's initiative. You knew the truth from the very beginning. One of them lowered his eyelids, and the corner of his mouth twitched in a nervous smile from the realization of everything that was happening. My whole life was a lie. So why you? The only one I trusted. His interlocutor clicked his tongue and moved his head to the side to avoid the gaze directed at him. It was too hard to see so much melancholy, resentment, misunderstanding and sadness. It was hard to accept that he had let down the second person in his long life. People who had become truly dear. I made a mistake, he admitted unexpectedly quietly, indulging in days long past. I believed in you. You so fiercely proved to everyone that fate can be changed. That it has no power over us, and I decided to help you with this. After all. Their gazes met, wanting to understand more than had just been said. I spent my entire life running from the fate that was placed upon me. But now I understand that there are things that cannot be changed. This world must burn in fire. And I am the only one forced to pay for this mistake. They fell silent again, and the girl, who had seemingly been forgotten, simply did not have the strength to ask questions. What was happening was too much of a shock even for her. She could only hope that this was all a dream. Just a complete lie and only a figment of her imagination. You will help me, he finally continued firmly. She may not survive the ritual. The girl shuddered when she realized that they were talking about her. This is not required. The day before. Here's another complaint, Mr. Hokage. The girl put a sheet of paper on the table and smiled weakly, seeing how her boss began to boil as he read. Minato clenched his teeth and barely kept himself from tearing up the letter. No air conditioning in the room, an unbalanced diet in the hotel menu that causes obesity rather than restoring strength. And then what? Namikaze hissed, putting the document on the edge of the table, behind a stack of other notices and reports, so as not to see this nonsense. Did you forget to put a chocolate bar on the pillow after cleaning? Or does it take a long time to adjust the temperature of the water in the tap? Come on, Mr. Hokage, just don't focus on it. You need to relax and take your mind off it, the assistant purred, and Minato looked up at her, trying to remember if he hired her because of some outstanding qualities or just. Her long red hair shone in the sun and was like a living flame. The green irises of her eyes were now sparkling greedily, and her round, toned chest under her light black jacket often rose and fell due to her quickened pulse. Her legs, which were not touched by stretch marks or scars, were squeezed tighter than usual, so that her thighs touched each other. She wore short denim shorts on purpose, causing desire in men. Namikaze felt her chakra activate in anticipation. Aki had been working for him for the second year and was a clanless orphan, the same age as Naruto. And he knew every inch of her body. He knew that she was just a copy of Kushina. He knew how low he had fallen. There's still a lot to do, Aki, go. Minato shook his head. As you say, Mr. Hokage. The girl answered monotonously and bowed, heading towards the exit. But before she could get to the door, there was a knock and it was opened without permission. Aki wanted to be indignant, but she stopped herself and turned her gaze to the Hokage. The man who entered was too similar to him. Did you want something, Naruto? The girl looked at the guy in front of her in surprise. Short blonde hair, blue eyes, a handsome face, all of which he got from his father. A white t-shirt, dark breeches and flip-flops. Aki had never seen such a style for a trip to the village leader. But the emblem on the belt caught her eye the most. Hidden Rain? Hello, Hokage-sama. Uzumaki smiled broadly and made way for the doorway. Are you leaving already? Too bad, too bad. That is, the assistant came to her senses. Maybe some tea? Not. Yes, that would be great. Naruto interrupted his father. Aki-chan. The girl disappeared instantly, loudly slamming the door behind her. Uzumaki glanced around the office, but quickly realized that only Minato himself had changed. After taking a few steps, he sat down in the chair to the left of his father and grinned. All shinobi arranged their offices this way, so that in case of an emergency their working hand would be free. Some called it a tactical move, but the young ruler of the rain himself considered it paranoia. If you were attacked in the very heart of the village, then it was a problem for the entire security service. So what did you want? You understand, there's a lot to do right now. Aren't you afraid that mom will kill you? Naruto asked with a smile. And that pretty assistant of yours? Or the other way around? What, excuse me? Namikaze tried to hide his surprise, but he did a poor job. It was too unexpected a question from a person who simply physically could not know any gossip or details of his personal life. Your chakra is in it in tiny amounts, Uzumaki began, but immediately corrected himself, and I'm not talking about the seal of silence. I felt it too on my lower lip, if I'm not mistaken. I've always wondered how some people come up with the idea of putting them in such places. How? Brings back memories. I can tell you a story about observation and deduction again, but it's much simpler. Naruto closed his eyes and after a few seconds Minato saw them already changed. I feel everyone in Konoha, even outside of it. Such a minor chakra dissonance that remains after sex in a partner is very easy for me to notice. But don't worry, your relationship with your mother is none of my business. Because she too? Minato smiled sadly, trying to catch his gaze on anything in the office, just not to look into the piercing copper eyes. You know. Naruto blinked and the Sen chakra left his body. If you have nothing, you have your honor. If you have no honor, you have nothing. I told this same phrase many years ago to my student, Kakashi. How do you know it? It's not that important. Only its essence. Although again, your relationship is none of my business. If you're not going to tell Kushina anything, then tell me why you came. At that moment the door opened and Aki entered the room with a tray. With precise movements, she appeared at the table and placed a white cup with steam billowing above it in front of Minato. The girl quickly approached Uzumaki and he took the dishes himself, not afraid of getting burned. "You're free, Aki. Tell everyone not to disturb me for now." "Maybe something else, Mr. Hokage." The assistant only glanced at the boss. Most of her attention was focused on the guy. "Naruto-san?" "You're very kind, Aki-chan, but we need to talk." Naruto smiled and nodded his head towards the exit. His smile grew wider as he felt anger and resentment. "And she doesn't want to waste time." "Stop dodging, Naruto." Namikaze finally showed his character, directly hinting that his patience was running out. "Speak. The world around us is changing." Uzumaki answered in the same tone as his father. "I've heard that before. Do you have any information?" "As far as I know, the Kage Council was just a waste of time." Naruto began from afar, as if testing the Hokage. At least that's what Minato thought, cursing the Uzumaki blood. Sometimes it seemed to him that pissing people off was their enhanced Kekkei Genkai. "You're doing the same thing now. Do you know anything about Biju, who hunts them?" Namikaze frowned, looking around and checking the barrier against prying ears. At first he thought he misheard. Then he made sure he hadn't fallen into a genjutsu. His son was still sitting in his chair, sipping his tea, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just admitted that it was his actions that had caused the Kage to gather urgently. As if it wasn't his mother who was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. "What did you say? You asked too many questions. Are you getting old or something? This is no time for jokes." Minato's fist crashed down on the table, causing it to creak pitifully. "The captured Biju are with me, but I need the rest as well." He spoke too calmly for a man who could start a world war. Namikaze couldn't help but remember the Chunin exam 6 years ago, when he saw the same look, the same confidence in words and actions. The unbending will in decisions, when you understand that in order to achieve the goal, you need to sacrifice something. "But why? I'm just a go-between doing the dirty work." "You know about the prophecy from Jiraiya or the Toads, right?" Yes, Minato was already having a hard time understanding what was happening. He wanted to drink. A lot. And he also wanted to believe that this conversation was just a prank. "But you are not his student," and it was specifically said there. "It was changed, I don't know why, but the fact is there. The prophecy gives the illusion of choice and that's all." There was a silence, each of them thinking about where the consequences of their decision would lead them. "Answer me, Naruto." Namikaze spoke after a few minutes. "Why shouldn't I grab you right now, put you in a cage, call the Kage and decide what to do with you?" "Because the chain of events has already been set in motion. With or without me, your conservative foundations will collapse. Change is inevitable, it's fate." Uzumaki grinned, putting the empty cup on the table. "I'm telling you all this because you have the right to know. I hope that you can understand me. Understand that because of the words of an old toad, you want to kill your mother for the sake of Kyuubi? There are things that only a select few are destined to know. It's a damned burden." Naruto shook his head. "But I asked you to understand that someone has to shoulder it. Let's say, just for a moment, I believe you, but you still haven't said what you're trying to achieve with your actions. Do you want to start a new war for the Bija?" "I want to break the circle." Orochimaru leaned over the microscope, carefully observing the reaction of the cells under the influence of the new poison, a sample of which he received from the bird Jiraiya from the rain, and which he improved with his own efforts. He never ceased to be amazed at the talent of Sasori of the Red Sands. After all, he was the creator of this work. It was almost impossible to make an antidote without knowing the composition, and even Orochi wondered if he could survive this without resorting to his forbidden technique in the end. The cells being tested behaved as usual, but an experienced eye could see slowly developing necrosis. The victim should not know about their fate until the very end, so as not to have time to take measures. It will all start with shortness of breath and sweating, as if you were simply overworked or it was hot outside. Then a slight tingling in the fingers and numbness of the limbs. If you were drinking, you will not even notice it right away. Deterioration of vision, impaired coordination. The cells begin to understand that they are poisoned, but their accelerated division will only spread the poison faster. There is no antidote. You begin to choke, realizing that the lungs are not doing their job. The pulse has already crossed the 150 mark. More and more infected blood passes through the heart. You are still alive, but the end is inevitable. This is a symphony of death. Orochimaru made a note in his notebook and looked away. The man on the operating table was already decomposing, emitting a foul stench, although it was still 2 hours ago he was alive and absolutely healthy. Spies have always existed, and one of the legendary trio never needed to find test subjects. Mr. Orochimaru, you have guessed. The young man adjusted his glasses, which reflected the soft green-blue glow of the laboratory. His gray hair was pulled back into a low ponytail at the back of his head, and his body was hidden by a white robe. Your friends, Mrs. Tsunade and Jiraiya-san. HN, the scientist was not surprised by how much indifference his student put into this phrase. Finish here, Kabuto, and then we will continue observing the 47th. As you say, Lord Orochimaru. Sarutobi Hiruzen's student bared his teeth. He liked this boy for his obedience and great talents. Pulled from the crucible of clan feuds, he quickly learned to appreciate the hand that feeds. The ideal servant. Putting the notebook in his pants pocket, he headed upstairs where they were waiting for him. You took a long time. Senju sat in a chair and sipped sake from a bowl. She preferred alcohol to tea when visiting. Did you dissect someone alive again? He didn't suffer. The scientist whispered in response, sitting down at his desk. Rest assured, I am humane in these matters. Damn vivisectionist, muttered Jiraiya, sitting opposite Tsunade. I never understood who instilled this passion for science in you. Understanding, my dear friend, is the prerogative of others. Don't bother yourself. Orochimaru chuckled, glancing at Kabuto's report on the latest mission in the area near the former hidden maelstrom. Interesting. Danzo began to suspect something. The only woman in the room quickly intervened to prevent a squabble. I began to notice his people more and more often in the places where we appeared. He has suspected for a long time, Tsunade. He just can't find direct evidence yet. And his own strength is not enough to eliminate the cause of unrest. Orochi leaned back in his chair, studying his partner with his yellow eyes, because reckless actions can lead to the split of Konoha and a civil war. Without Minato, he can't do anything. What do you say, Jiraiya? Senju poured herself another drink. Our friends in action? They will support us if they end up with a Sharingan or Byakugan. The hermit sighed tiredly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. At first, they both wanted dojutsu, but Naruto was able to negotiate. What a good boy. Orochimaru laughed quietly. And unpredictable. He agreed to replace his father too easily. We helped him with the Biju. The prophecy, Jiraiya tried to object, but was stopped by a wave of his hand. Are you sure he told the truth? The scientist asked. Saving the world from the Ten Tails, Eternal Tsukuyumi, the Otsutsuki clan. Sounds more like a fairy tale. He repeated the great prophet word for word. The hermit began to boil. The tribe of toads became his family when the war took away all his relatives. And he always stood up for them when the situation demanded it. Ordinary people are not given to know such things, and how Naruto found out is unknown to me. But a fact is a fact. I agree with Orochi, Tsunade said after a long silence. Even if the story about the beast is not a fairy tale, he can give us up to Minato. The boy has become a threat. It is easier to remove him and seal the already captured Biju. With so many tailed beasts, Konoha will be stronger than ever. And even if our allies turn away from us, destroying them will not be a problem. We've started a dangerous game. Jiraiya sighed, studying his broad palms as if there was a parchment with answers to all questions there. We've forgotten what honor and trust are. We don't know where he keeps the vessels with the Biju, and we don't have the key. Orochimaru tapped his finger on Kabuto's report, and then released a drop of chakra into the sheet. The paper immediately faded, the writing on it smeared, and a second later it became just an ink blot. We still need each other, and Naruto will do anything for his goal. The exam starts tomorrow, and in a month and a half there will be the final round. All the Kage will arrive and then we will do what we have planned. Tsunade drained another bowl and stood up, heading for the exit. Our dream will begin to come true. Orochimaru watched his comrades and a carnivorous smile appeared on his face. The situation was becoming more interesting with each passing day. He took a notebook out of his pocket and opened it to the page with the last entry. Experiment number 83. Tsunade Senju's leukocytes did not detect the poison immediately after introduction. The accelerated cell division eventually increased the degree of infection. Complete destruction occurred within 34 minutes and 15 seconds. Orochi licked his lips and took out a pen, wanting to add to the entry. Success. Minato put his hands behind his head as he lay in his bed. His thoughts were far away, so he didn't pay attention when the bedroom door opened and a shadow dived in. Namikaze only flinched when he felt hot touches on his chest. Kushina, Minato tried to get up, but a strong female hand did not let him do it. His wife threw off the blanket and sat on him. Shut up, she whispered commandingly, moving her pelvis slowly. I haven't felt you in too long. So just shut up and let me enjoy you. Kushina, his hands ended up under her nightgown. He didn't want to sleep, although his body was exhausted from fatigue, but it was pleasant, long forgotten. Only with a beloved woman can one reach such heights of pleasure that all worries, problems, and other worldly vanity seemed insignificant, trivial. Minato turned his head, admiring his wife's face. For so long he had not seen peace in those emerald eyes. And it hurt him so much that he allowed their life to slide down to such sad events. I miss this, Kushina suddenly admitted and pressed herself closer. Why did you have to bring everything to such a breakdown? If words could describe all my feelings, my love, believe me. Namikaze answered quietly. I'm very sorry. Naruto didn't just come back for no reason, right? I'm his mother after all, and I feel like something's wrong. If you found out that Naruto was hunting for the bijou, that his goal was to challenge the entire world, what would you do, Kushina? I love him, the woman answered after a moment of confusion. No matter what he is like or what he is up to. And I probably wouldn't be able to stop him. Yes, I understand you. Minato agreed. After all, he is our boy. Why are you asking such a thing? Naruto, he... No, what are you saying? Just like that, Namikaze smiled and stroked his wife's hair. Go to sleep, we have to get up early. She fell asleep almost immediately, so much emotion had tired her. Minato still held Kushina close to him. He gently kissed the woman he loved on the lips. Raising his hand, his index and middle fingers lit up with chakra and touched her forehead. Everything will be fine. Naruto was in the darkness. It was all around him, swallowing up all the things that dared to enter it. And he would have thought he was alone here, if not for the clanking of chains in the distance. The little girl sat in front of the monster, hugging her knees. Tears ran from her green eyes, and her long red hair was scattered around, enveloping its owner in a kind of cocoon. It was her own personal hell, created by her own hands. So Nagato wasn't lying. You really did seal the QB all by yourself. She shuddered and turned around quickly, not believing her own eyes. Naruto? How did you get here? Hello, Mom. The boy smiled and knelt down in front of her. His fingers carefully wiped the wet tracks from her flushed cheeks. Your seal has weakened so much that you're only holding him with your chakra? A terrible fate. It was my choice. She nodded confidently, but grabbed his hand. Being here every night alone with the bijou was scary and hard on the mind. I can help you. Naruto looked into the huge crimson eyes with vertical pupils that were studying them all the time. Right, Kurama? Bijou was silent for a long time, as if savoring the silence that had arisen. I already told you that you don't deserve the right to call me that. Minato didn't let go of Kushina's hand. He saw how she sometimes winced in her sleep, as if she was seeing something bad. He wanted to help, to cover her in his arms, protecting her from the whole world, so that no misfortune could harm her. Even if this misfortune came from one of the closest people. Namikaze looked up at Naruto, who was sitting opposite him. His son's palm was lying on his mother's bare stomach, where a black pattern of a tattoo seal for a bijou appeared on the skin. And only now Minato saw that the dark lines had lost their clarity, as if they had blurred, and this could only mean one thing: the fuin had worn out, and Kushina had been hiding it for a long time. Relax. Naruto opened his eyes and removed his hand, massaging his stiff neck. She's fine. Relatively, of course. The seal. We must strengthen it urgently. No, QB won't bother Mom. Uzumaki stood up. What did you do? Minato grabbed his son's hand, not letting him go. I made a deal with him. Kushina sat up in bed. What she had heard was still not fitting into her head. There were too many questions to know exactly which one to ask first. And would they answer her at all? But she couldn't remain silent. Her fingers touched the emerald drop in her earlobe, betraying the woman's confusion. Who are you? She looked into the blue eyes, wanting to know the truth. You are not Naruto. Minato froze. What did she say? You're probably right. Uzumaki laughed weakly, freeing himself from the Hokage's grip. The Naruto you knew died many years ago. I didn't feel like sleeping. Some kind of anxious feeling settled in my chest and didn't want to go away. Something similar happened many years ago. Then everything around changed. And thoughts about how the world around was changing did not give me any peace. Nothing would be the same as before. Instinct screamed about it. Hinata lowered her head, hiding her face behind her long bangs. She didn't need the Byakugan to feel the range of chakra that was currently swirling over the Hokage mountain. The Bijou chakra had its own specific flavor. She was convinced of this after getting to know Gaara of the Sand a little better. And the girl could discern the Jinchuriki's mood only by it. The delegation from Kumo included two-tailed beast carriers. An unprecedented move from the great village, even more unexpected from Kumo, which was considered the most conservative. The cloud rarely let even simple genin go for exams. And Hinata wouldn't have cared about all this if she hadn't caught a familiar warm note in the concentration of the Bijou's cold chakra. Like a bright star in an endless dark sky, this power seemed so familiar and at the same time completely unfamiliar. A sudden pang of jealousy came out of nowhere. Princess Hyuga tilted her head upward, looking at anything in the room to hold back those stupid tears of hurt. After all, he didn't owe her anything. They hadn't made any promises, but deep down she had hoped for something more than friendship. You were absolutely right then. A forced smile appeared on his lips by itself. You should have grown up earlier and understood where my thoughts were and where others were. They put on a show worthy of the final stage of the tournament. Hinata didn't flinch from surprise, because she wasn't the only resident of the estate. Her sister had been standing behind her for quite some time, but for some reason she was waiting for a more convenient moment to dilute the oppressive atmosphere. The patrols were notified by the Hokage himself. Hinata answered only when her eyes stopped shining in the moonlight. Hanabi must not see this weakness. Not now, when the entire clan saw her as a worthy successor. It's him, isn't it? The younger sister asked, although she already knew the answer to her question. And not only to this one. Yes. You love him. Just 3 words that made Hinata shrink inside, but hold back her emotions. Do you love him? The question that had been ringing in my head for 6 years. Which had been giving me no peace and making me send all my suitors far and for a long time. But now everything was falling into place. No. The voice treacherously wavered at the end, but it went unnoticed. He is my friend. You still have a chance. Hanabi took a few steps forward, tearing her silhouette out of the darkness of the room. Her voice was unusually serious. And this only caused a bitter smile. After all, she had her chance. Thank you, Hanabi. Hinata walked over and buried her nose in her younger sister's hair. She was grateful for the support, but she couldn't put such a burden on her shoulders. She was the one who had to be the support. Not just for her, but for the entire clan. A leader who hesitated was a leader who made fatal decisions. I have already found my answer. He was taught to hide his emotions. They can easily read an opponent. You must be as hard as a rock. Your mind must be like a cloudless sky. Anger and rage are also a source of strength, but they will destroy you as quickly as they give you strength. He remembered those words better than the lullaby his mother sang him before he went to sleep. He repeated them every time he saw an opponent in front of him, but right now Sasuke was angry. At the man he rightfully considered his friend. One of the 2 outside the clan. The two-tailed beast chakra was exactly as his father had described it, having met Nikomata's Jinchuriki during the Third War. Fugaka had seen Kushina use her demon's power, and it had been like a firestorm. The two-tailed beast sent shivers down his spine, and its appearance was comparable to the coldest snowstorm. Sasuke had all the battle stories almost memorized. It was the history of his clan, war was part of the Uchiha clan's culture. And now Sasuke saw a lone fire in the middle of this blizzard. This was what angered him, because he turned away from the Hokage mountain towards the Hyuga quarter. His girlfriend, the second person he let into his comfort zones, could not help but notice the same thing as he did. They were very familiar with the strength of their former teammate. It was very bright and prominent when Naruto himself wanted it. And Sasuke had no doubt that this was exactly what Namikaze had achieved. No, now Uzumaki. Are you sure this is your business? Itachi appeared out of nowhere, but he didn't try to shock him. Now was not the time. He was worried, because no matter how well his younger brother hid his emotions, his eyes spoke louder than words. Is it all that obvious? Sasuke sighed and sat down on the step, his palms running over his face, and then his fingers getting lost in a tuft of thick hair. Maybe Itachi is right? I know you too well. She didn't deserve this. And he didn't deserve your condemnation. They both fell silent, admiring the full moon and lost in their own thoughts. Such conversations were rare, but they were a breath of fresh air. The responsibilities weighed too heavily on their shoulders, forcing them to be strong in public, taking away the opportunity to talk about such simple, life-changing things. But you don't know them like I do, Sasuke finally said, looking into his brother's deep black eyes. They were filled with interest and mockery. It struck a chord and the Uchiha grimaced. After all, I understand their feelings better, right? I know enough to talk about such things. He wanted to object. Passionately, childishly, like before, in the distant past, to stick out his lower lip and puff out his cheeks. But Sasuke held back, and a minute later he quietly laughed. Itachi supported him. Yes, she is strong. A slight smile froze on her lips. In the end, the world does not revolve around this troublemaker Uzumaki. Maybe he settled on someone else? Itachi speaks with utmost seriousness, and it even scared Sasuke for a second. Come on, brother, this isn't funny anymore. Who said I was joking? The elder Uchiha stood up and headed into the house, leaving a confused look behind him. Sasuke wanted to follow, but paused, looking once more towards the Hyuga quarter. An image of Hinata appeared before his eyes and the boy was confused for a second. They are just friends, right? I wish I knew the answer. She had been studying the ceiling with her eyes for an hour, because there was no way to sleep. This accumulation of chakra, which had turned the whole of Konoha on its ears, irritated all those sensory senses that she had inherited from her parents. They were not as strong as her father's, but even those grains were enough to focus all her attention on what was happening. Kagami clicked her tongue and rolled over. She knew that Kishio was also awake, but she still didn't want to disturb him unnecessarily. The stupid brother might not have put on such a show for so many people. They are behaving. Uchiha did not turn around, but continued to look out the window at the starry sky. Too provocatively. I hope they get a serious beating tomorrow, the girl grumbled. Her cheek twitched as another burst of chakra occurred. Is the bijou enjoying himself, too? But nevertheless, his appearance shook the entire leaf. Kishio lay on his back and looked into the eyes of his beloved with a smile on his lips. She was furious for no reason, but this was typical of all representatives of the clan, in whose veins the blood of Uzumaki flowed. They were too impulsive, and even Kagami's cold-bloodedness sometimes showed cracks. Especially when it came to her family. I don't understand, are you defending him? He's in charge of his own life. His fingers gently touched Namikaze's cheek. Especially since the patrols were notified by your father during the day. I think the only people who react worse than you are the guys from the cloud. Amazing restraint. Kagami bit the other's finger, chuckling contentedly. I'm just glad he's back, that's all. Uchiha grimaced, pulling his hand away. Sometimes his fiancée was unbearable. Back? The girl sat up abruptly, staring into the black eyes, trying to understand whether this was an unfortunate joke or was said seriously. Naruto is the leader of a foreign village. Does that mean he's no longer your brother? Kishio suddenly spoke sharply, not believing what he heard. Or the son of Minato-sama and Kushina-san? No, but... Then just be glad that he's here while you can. Kagami lay down and turned away to hide her wet eyes. Kishio rarely raised his voice at her, and never did it without a reason, but every time it hurt. She was wrong now, It was stupid to say something like that, but hormones and feelings made themselves known. Naruto was here, nearby, but the thought that he had appeared so unexpectedly, and would disappear from life just as abruptly did not give her peace. Namikaze was angry and it resulted in such conversations. "Sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." Kishio moved closer and hugged her, pressing her to himself. His warmth pleasantly warmed her, not allowing her to get bogged down in her thoughts. "I just feel like he didn't just show up out of nowhere," the girl admitted in a quiet voice. "Maybe it's just my imagination, but something is going on. All this fuss about the bijou, this big Chunin exam. For Jinchuriki will be present in Konoha. Too many coincidences. And how are you trying to connect this with Naruto?" Uchiha grinned. "When we were having dinner at my parents', he brought up the topic of the Kage's council." Kishio winced, but said nothing. This was all too strange to be a mere coincidence. This place was very strange and had never been seen before. Everything in the room radiated antiquity. Every detail was chosen according to the owner's taste. Huge tapestries on the walls with images of past battles, where you could clearly see representatives of the Senju and Uchiha clans. His gaze darted to the fireplace, in which a blue fire blazed, which did not warm, but on the contrary, gave off a cold. Tenacious, unpleasant, otherworldly. Above it hung a picture, which depicted 3 boys and an adult man who put his hands on the children's shoulders. And if Hagoromo was easy to recognize because of his specific appearance, then the guys. A second later Naruto realized that in front of him was the calm Azura and the arrogant Indra. But the third child, the eldest, who was smiling from ear to ear, had emerald eyes and hair that looked like it was washed in blood, was unfamiliar. Logic presented the fact, but the heart still refused to accept it. The Uzumaki came from? Naruto shook his head and turned to face the 2 leather chairs, with a small table between them holding a glass of wine with bright red lipstick stains on it. After all, this whole place was just a creation of the imagination, and many things could just be a figment of that imagination. The guy felt a light touch on his shoulder and turned around, but there was no one behind him. "Isn't it enough for you, Yujuto, that you have come?" The girl glanced around her house. "To my humble abode? Still the same lover of games." Naruto wasn't surprised by such an unexpected appearance, so he simply sat down in a chair opposite the owner of the room. "Matatabi." The blue eyes of the interlocutor flashed with interest and began to emit a faint haze. She casually tucked a loose strand of black hair behind her ear and smiled. Her bijou's appearance was very similar to the Uchiha's. The same white skin and thin facial lines, quite fragile in appearance. But Naruto felt that if he pressed a little harder, this shell would burst, dousing it with uncontrollable force. A strange choice, although everything here was strange, especially. Uzumaki took another quick look at the painting, which did not escape the Two-Tails' notice. "You know the name given by father. Although what else can you expect from a person who is patronized by Shinigami himself?" "Damn burden!" Naruto chuckled, clearly making it clear that this topic was unpleasant for him. "Eternal life," Matatabi retorted with a mad gleam in her eyes, feeling the guy opposite her tense up. "Of course, if you don't do what they want you to do. You know something? I hear voices," the girl answered evasively, twirling her hair around her finger. "Some are lying, some are telling the truth. Some know the future. Damn cat." Uzumaki bared his teeth and leaned forward, his eyes changed, turning copper against the background of the impenetrably blackened Scara. "Do you want me to force the truth out of you? You need me, don't you?" Nibi fluttered her eyelashes innocently, making a surprised face. But then her lips stretched into a blissful smile. "Besides, there are more pleasant ways to get information." "Really? Then let's play." Naruto stood up and in one step towered over the girl, grabbing her hair at the back of her head and lifting her head so that she looked at his face. He ran the back of his hand over the velvety skin, feeling how thirst and interest flashed through Nibi's emotions. An evil grin cut his lips and Uzumaki grabbed her by the neck. Matatabi felt a burning sensation, and then noticed a faint glow. She watched with fear as black hieroglyphs began to crawl across her skin from the place of touch. All her strength that could have burst forth in the blink of an eye weakened, and a second later, it was completely no longer felt. To remain forever in human form, unable to use one's own power. How do you like that game, Biju? Yes, I see it clearly now. The Two Tails hissed, her blue eyes darting to the painting above the fireplace. You are the same as him. A monster born of battle and the concentration of chakra. Who is this man? Hagoromo's son? Is it a human? Nibi grinned. And you already guessed, didn't you? That's nonsense. Naruto let go of the girl's neck and walked away from her. Rikudo only had 2 sons, 2 bastards who started the longest and bloodiest war in history. You're right, this man is not related to father by blood. He was adopted. He was the first one to be called Uzumaki. Matatabi felt the seals on her body begin to disappear, regaining control over her body and chakra. She saw the boy next to her being swallowed up by a whirlwind of thoughts. And she remembered that fleeting meeting with Shinigami. Nibi had doubted it then, but now she clearly understood that fate could not be changed. Even old man Rikudo had failed. He had only given her a reprieve and hope. It's much more complicated than it seems, Naruto. There's a lot you don't know, even though you're in the thick of it. You're just unlucky, if you want to. So the stories about you walking under the god of death yourself aren't fairy tales, are they? Uzumaki sighed heavily and walked back to the chair, falling into it. You know what I have to do, don't you? But why me? Why not Indra's reincarnation, or at least both of us? And who said that you were once the reincarnation of Azura and Sasuke Indra? The eyes of the demonic cat froze on the face of the red-haired man from the picture. She remembered the days long gone, but for her it was like yesterday. Everything was so vividly etched in her memory. Father knew how to make up good stories, you should have realized by now. A clear example of this is this stupid prophecy, which supposedly gives the right to choose. Then, a crazy guess flashed through his mind like lightning and his copper pupils widened. His gaze was directed to the same place where Matatabi had been looking for a minute. It can't be. Hagoromo always looked after you and did everything so that when the time came, you would choose salvation over the destruction of everything he had created. Naruto, she pointed her finger at the eldest child. Is you. I want to know everything. All the Bija have the memory of the 10 tails and know much more than they think. But you, for some reason, I am sure, are the only one like that thanks to the patronage of your master. Therefore, Uzumaki's face darkened, and steel notes sounded in his voice. Everything that you do not tell, I will squeeze out of you by force. His throat was terribly dry. The moon was still high in the sky, and Yujito was sleeping next to him. Naruto touched her forehead and the seal on her skin evaporated into thin air, leaving behind only a blue haze. The boy reached for the flask of water and drank greedily. Cold sweat was pouring down his face, and his thoughts were racing through his head. Not even in his worst nightmare could he have imagined what he had learned today. It was putting the puzzle together and putting everything in its place. An ordinary person really shouldn't know such things, but he was no longer ordinary. Not anymore. Please wake me up and tell me that this is all just a dream. Uzumaki covered his face with his hands and laughed quietly. Fate is truly a cruel thing. This world must burn in fire. What are you saying there? Ni muttered sleepily and pressed herself closer. Let me sleep, otherwise you're grumbling like that damn cat. Sorry, Naruto replied after several long seconds. Cat Biju Rikudo. The unexpected thought was born in his mind so abruptly, and was so crazy that Uzumaki's eyes widened. Sleep well. Chapter 8 It was still dusk over Konoha. But dawn was just around the corner. It was truly a beautiful time of day, serene, quiet, nature awakening from its sleep. The two stood on Mount Hokage, enjoying the peace of the time of day. New world, different lives, same fate. Time goes by, but simple truths remain unchanged. I'm so tired of this. Kushina turned her red eyes from the horizon to the guy next to her. He was half asleep, because for him, vision was superfluous at such moments. It spoiled the impression. Naruto felt and saw much more than ordinary people. You can dissolve your consciousness by merging with the Jinchuriki. Painless oblivion, almost a happy ending. A new disaster in the form of the reincarnated Kyuubi. Uzumaki raised his eyelids and smiled. Sincerely, truly, throwing off all masks, because next to this Biju they were not needed. But you are afraid of what this creature will do with such power. And the goal imposed on you all by the Rakuto will sink into oblivion. The old man was guided by logic, feeding his hopes with care and love for his creations, but still was not devoid of the pragmatism inherent in people. He was a master of his craft, since he was able to put such powerful mental bookmarks in you that even years of persecution, hatred and impenetrable rage could not exhaust them. Kushina frowned, but after a few seconds her face smoothed out, taking on a thoughtful look. The Ninetales, who was now keeping the body under his control, had felt a long time ago that this faith in Hagoromo, the goals he had set, was unnatural. An almost insane desire to follow them to the very end. But he didn't want to accept it. The image of the good-natured old man, his sincere smile and the tenderness that only a father could give to his children were still frozen in his memories. It was too hard to break this memory into fragments, even despite the cracks that already existed. Of course, I could be wrong. Naruto spoke again, seeing the torment in the Biju's eyes. It was replaced by confusion, as if the fox had been given hope and then taken away, driving him into the corner of his own thoughts even more. But I am a human, he was one too, and no matter how different we all are, we still have more in common. There are instincts that do not need to be tested by time and experience, they are embedded in us from birth. You mean? Kushina's eyes narrowed, carefully studying the face of her interlocutor. This conversation tormented the healed wound. Yes, if I were in his place, that's what I would do. It doesn't matter. The Biju waved it off, not wanting to delve deeper into the topic. Especially not with this person. Better tell me, was it hard to catch my brothers? I feel the imprint of their chakra on you. Very simple. Uzumaki grinned, squinting from the rays of the rising sun. A new day marked the beginning of the exam, which would be the starting point. Naruto hadn't told the fox anything yet, putting off the most interesting part until the end. It would be all the more fun to see his surprised face at the end of what was happening. It would be all the more difficult to put on his shoulders. They all came with me of their own free will. Oh, I saw Kushina's memories and I know that Son Goku and Aisabu haven't been sealed for at least the last 50 years. With them, given the specifics of your knowledge, you could still come to an agreement. But Saiken has been moving from one seal to another for a long time now. Namikaze looked at the guy with a heavy, unblinking gaze, as if trying to say something without words. The smell of his hatred for the human race is still on your skin. Submission through force, is that voluntary in your understanding? It's not for you to judge me, or to reproach me either. Naruto chuckled, falling on his back and throwing his hands behind his head. The sky was cloudless and blue, so serene that for a second they even forgot everything they were here for. They put the burden of responsibility for the whole world on me. They put me in the same jar with liars, hypocrites and egoists. Such is fate. A wave of the hand cut off the fox's sentence, causing him to snort in irritation. He did not like being interrupted, and only the boy at his feet allowed himself such luxury without fear of the consequences. You don't need to tell me about fate. I appreciated its mockery more than anyone. Uzumaki closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Ironic, isn't it? In order to save this world, I must first turn it into dirt and dust, so that the flower of the future can grow. Where are you from? Matatabi was so kind that she told me many things that none of you, Biju, could. Shinigami expressed his words too floridly that he hiccuped. People began to appear on the streets, hurrying to work and on their business. Among this stream, one could also notice the genin who had come to Konoha, who were flocking to the Shinobi Academy. There was 1 hour left before the start of the first stage. The prophecy is a lie, but it contains, as you put it, a simple truth. This world must be cleansed to save it from global destruction and turning into a lifeless wasteland. Tell me more? Ninetales grinned, anticipating what old man Rakuto was so afraid of. The memory of him, as well as the established orders, were still in force, but the cracks. They made themselves known. You have a front row seat, you'll find out everything soon enough. The 2 girls and the boy were nervous as they approached the Chunin exam venue. The Jonin mentor left them, saying that he would wait for them after the first round. He believed in the strength of his charges as much as he believed in his new Kage. The parting speech was short but powerful. He could only wish them luck and faith in themselves and their comrades. Team spirit was one of the foundations of a positive result. Do you think Naruto-sama will come with Nobu-sensei? The girl blushed at the mention of the leader of her village. She felt her cheeks burn and bowed her head to hide her embarrassment with her long blonde hair. Although it was unnecessary, because her partners noticed it. You idiot Suzu! The second girl on the team gave the named one a light slap and puffed indignantly. Naruto-sama is very busy right now. And I doubt he likes girls who melt just at the mention of his name, right, Hana? The only guy in the trio laughed loudly, throwing his hands behind his head and closing his gray eyes. That's right, Jiro, Hana also laughed, but when she saw Suzu hang her head even more, she stopped. Come on, he's just a bird out of our league, my friend. The girl looked away, remembering her past for a moment. Their past. They were all orphaned in infancy. When Nagato-sama first came to power, many still supported Hanzo's salamander. Their parents simply chose a new ruler, seeing him as a better future for Amigakure. They chose him, and paid for it with their lives. There were quite a few children left after such raids. Homeless children who survived as best they could, cursing the current government simply because fate was too cruel. Suzu, Hana and Jiro didn't know each other until this man introduced them. He extended his hand personally, not through posters and barkers, not afraid of the dirt of this world. Not much older than them, his words and smile inspired confidence. You wanted to follow him. They weren't the only such children, yes, but for each of them he became something of a personal hero. Some admired him, some imitated him, some fell in love at first sight. He gave them all a home and a purpose in life. To protect their home by becoming a shinobi. A blade that would strike down the enemies that had so often reduced aim to rubble. And then Nagato Uzumaki left, leaving all his affairs behind. And in his place came Naruto-sama, young, strong, and charismatic. Hidden Rain needed a breath of fresh air, and he became it. And their shield. Gods, losers are flying to the exam like bees to honey. Although it would be better to call you annoying flies, an unfamiliar voice pulled Hana from her memories. She blinked and only now realized that they were already near the entrance to the academy, where a large crowd of genin from different hidden villages had gathered. She also saw how Jiro stood in front of them, protecting the girls from a possible threat. Many guys looked at this scene with mockery and indifference. Some with anxiety and regret, but they all received orders from their mentors not to interfere in such skirmishes. Provocations that were supposed to scare off weak candidates. Brother told me how the participants from AIM behaved cowardly at the last exam in Konoha. Shut your fucking mouth, Jiro hissed, feeling his rage boiling up inside him, and then his chakra going out of control, making his blonde hair flutter. He wanted to punch that tan bastard from Cloud in the face. Or what? The second genin of Kumo took a step forward, and his palm touched the hilt of the sword behind his back. Will you run away, tail between your legs, to cry on your mentor's shoulder? Jiro. Suzu placed her hand on her partner's shoulder, urging him to remain calm. No need. Listen to your bitch and get out of here while your arms and legs are still in place. An unpleasant crackle from lightning discharges was heard in the air. One moment, and Jiro only noticed a blurry movement from the side out of the corner of his eye. His cheekbone was covered with pain and he flew to the side, falling to the ground. Dark spots danced in his eyes, but he was ready to jump up and rush at the third opponent, who had been hiding in the crowd until then. Although you can leave her, she will have something to do after the first stage. Cloudman's hand deliberately slowly reached out to Suzu's face, but she only closed her eyes. Too soft and kind, that's why she chose the path of a medic nin. Healing wounds and saving lives, she felt a pleasant warmth inside and was always far from battles, but Sensei still insisted on their participation in the exam. It was a great experience for Genin, as he put it, remembering the past. Did your brother tell you about me, boy? The girl opened her tear-stained eyes, but saw only the broad back of a man in a white t-shirt in front of her. She looked at Hana and Jiro, who opened their mouths in amazement. Jonin have no right to interfere in the first stage, the Genin answered, looking insolently into the blue eyes. Having seen the emblem on the belt buckle with the AIM symbol before, he made a false conclusion. He also knew that his mentor and the entire hidden cloud were behind him. No one would want to start a conflict because of a minor scuffle between genin. And who said that I am their mentor? A wide grin revealed fangs that appeared due to a close connection with the Biju chakra, both in the womb and in adulthood. Rio, this is... The first genin of Kumo trembled all over. Yes, he had heard this story too. The devil of the leaf. Naruto Namikaze. What? The guy in front of Uzumaki took a step back, breaking the distance. The teacher was talking about this man, with hatred and contempt in his voice, and in his gaze then there was a thirst for revenge. Go to another sandbox, guys. Naruto noticed a surge of chakra and a desire for blood on the periphery of his senses. His blood. At the same second, a white-haired man with a broad sword on his back appeared behind the cloud genin. Before my mood gets spoiled. Namikaze! Darui's voice was laced with anger. Years had passed, but he still couldn't forget the faces of his fallen comrades. Even his oath to the Reikage himself couldn't calm this burning sense of justice. More respect. Uzumaki chuckled. I'm not some ordinary shinobi to you. Maybe Naruto-san? Or Uzumaki-sama? One more word. Darui reached for the blade, but froze centimeters from the handle. The cold of steel washed over his neck. You're right on time, Nobu. Naruto smiled. His fist fell onto his open palm. Exactly. Amikage-sama, this is what suits this situation. No. The man's eyes turned copper against the black background for a moment, just like the ones the Kumo Jonin had seen in many of his dreams. Get out of here before your old man has to drag more coffins out of the cloud. As soon as the scene ended, the genin headed into the academy building, and the ANBU breathed a sigh of relief in their shelters. Who knows who could have stopped these two if they had gotten serious? After what they had seen, no one even wanted to open their mouths. And many were now afraid to even think about touching the guys from Dazed. Naruto-sama. Suzu quickly wiped away her tears, remembering Jiro's words. She had to be strong so as not to disgrace her native village and her ruler. So strong that she would walk next to him, and not look at his back. Thank you. Well, guys, you really made me shake off the old days here. Uzumaki smiled broadly, scratching the back of his head. But from now on you're on your own. The Leaf Devil? Jiro jumped up to his team, looking at his Kage with envy. Now that's cool. There's nothing cool about it. Naruto's smile disappeared as he remembered that incident in the Forest of Death. Perhaps, years later, he realized that he didn't have to kill those people. Saving Sasuke and Hinata should have been done differently, but death was always the surest way. And very effective. I've done different things in my life. I regret many of them. I'm not proud of them. Any parting words? Hana was perceptive enough to realize that the man did not want to delve into the matter. Be strong. Naruto put his hand on Suzu's head and ruffled his blonde hair. And don't lose your mind. Moderate your ardor, forget about your pride, bow your head and kneel if the situation requires it. No imaginary values are worth your own life and your friends. You owe nothing to anyone, but at the same time everything at once. Retrospective Volume 1 Kirigakure 8 years after the death of Uzumaki Naruto. A light fog descended on the stadium, which did not prevent the spectators from watching the arena. Today was to be the final stage of the Chunin exam. The 10 best genin from different villages would meet in duels for the coveted title. But still, preference was given to those from the Hidden Mist. The advantage was on their side. Brings back memories. The red-haired man closed his eyes, sinking into nostalgia, wrapping himself in a warm blanket of thoughts and images that had appeared in his life after meeting him. What had happened before his first exam, Gaara resolutely did not want to remember. Too much pain and loss, spilled blood and brutal murders committed by the little Jinchuriki of the One Tail. It's a pity that he can't share them with us. They were hard times, but there was a lot of good in them. The second man sighed quietly, but no one noticed it behind the blue mask that hid half of his face. Over the years, Hatake Kakashi had aged greatly. Wrinkles had not passed him by. His job required him to be everywhere and know almost everything. It was exhausting and time-consuming, leaving no energy for the famous shinobi to even try to arrange his personal life. And the years, however, flew by quickly. Even too quickly. There was no successor, because Sasuke flatly refused the position that his best friend had dreamed of for so long. It's always nicer to remember the past with friends. Gaara nodded in agreement, and then looked at Kakashi cautiously, as if the next words could offend him. He could have become a good Hokage. But I wouldn't have become one, even in a more favorable outcome. Hatake rubbed his eyes tiredly. The noise of the crowd grew with every word the Mizukage spoke from the box above. She had prepared a wonderful speech, since she inspired the crowd so much. It was just a pity that the two Kage had almost completely missed it. They rarely had the opportunity to communicate. The affairs of their native villages were more important than personal meetings for conversations. He changed too much after that war. He was no longer the same perky boy with a fantastic dream. But he was a good friend. Gaara interrupted. A great comrade not only for Konoha, but for Suna as well. For me. For everyone, Gaara. Kakashi corrected the young ruler, surprised by such frankness. He was loved and known by many. In the end, they saved us all. But this is not the kind of peace I wanted. Not at the cost of his life. It's no one's fault, Gaara. He was helping Sasuke with. Sasuke. Sandy exhaled, the mask cracking for a second, revealing the Kazekage's entire attitude towards the named person. He got into this noose himself, but it tightened around Naruto's neck. Naruto was helping his friend. Hatake raised his voice, gripping the armrests. I sent him to help because no one else would have made it in time. So that means I'm also to blame for his death? Friend, Gaara said indifferently, raising his eyes to the sky. I once tried to dissuade Naruto from pursuing him any further. Friends shouldn't hurt each other so much. But Naruto was always stubborn, going straight to his goal. And achieving it. Did Sasuke deserve a friend who was ready to give his life for him? The two rulers' gazes met. And he gave it away. You'll never be able to forgive him, right, Gaara? Sadness crept into the Hokage's voice. He could understand the boy sitting next to him perfectly. He hated him just as much, he'd been in his place. But it didn't bring any satisfaction. Only emptiness. Forgiveness is not so easy to earn, Kakashi-san. The Kazekage watched the first two contenders, one of whom was his subordinate. I'm sure it will be at least a few years before I think about something like that. Naruto was too dear to me, he pulled me out of my own hell. A part of me died with him. Probably the part that saw Sasuke as a friend. The announced challengers entered the fray, and the Kage box fell silent. The Mizukage came down to them, so it was pointless to continue such personal topics. Kakashi didn't follow the tournament for the next few minutes. He remembered his last conversation with his student, remembered his own thoughts back then. And he realized how wrong he was. Naruto's death changed many and nothing was the same anymore. Retrospective Volume 2 Konoha 10 years after the death of Uzumaki Naruto. The sky was covered with gray clouds, and the first streaks of flashing lightning were already visible in the distance. He had never liked autumn. The man looked up, studying the approaching rain. He didn't care, because today he had come to visit the only person he could rightfully call his equal. A brother who had been found after the horrible death of his entire family. And just as quickly lost because of the foolish belief in his unique abilities. The body had never been found. So the grave he stood over was empty, and the only thing that had in common with the man was his name. Sasuke dropped to one knee and placed a box of ramen by the tombstone. It seemed stupid, but it was his friend's favorite thing. Flowers, tears, and compassion were things Naruto hated when it came to himself, even though he had given them to other people more than once. Long, thin fingers, abundantly covered with many small scars, touched the granite slab. Happy birthday, Uzuritanki. The first emotion finally showed on the stone face. A bitter, utterly tired smile, a smirk that reflected the thoughts of such a man better than words thrown in vain. His friend hated pity, but Uchiha Sasuke regretted many things, and most of all, one single decision that had become fatal for Naruto. I know you would forgive me for anything I did, but... The man faltered as the first drops of rain fell from the sky, streaming down his face in cold streams. An unpleasant chill began to grip his body with tenacious fingers. He didn't care. But I can't forgive myself. It started to rain. Sasuke felt two chakra pockets approaching him on the periphery of his senses, but he didn't pay attention to them. He already knew why they were there. Darling, let's go home. Sakura stood under an umbrella, hugging the child with one arm. Just a boy, in whom one could easily recognize the features of an Uchiha. Just like his father. From under his wet bangs, two dangerously burning dojutsu looked at them. I don't think you would like it if you killed yourself on his grave every year. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Stupid woman. Sadness, worry and pleading, how much had slipped into her words. She had chased his shadow for so many years, had even managed to grab hold of it, but she had never been able to understand. Or didn't want to. Sakura had never become more than an old friend for Sasuke. Even despite their child together. He turned his gaze to the boy. So much like him in childhood, just as smart and strong. As much as the elder Uchiha did not want it, he was a descendant of an ancient clan, the strongest blood flowed in his veins, which is why he taught his son almost everything. At the academy, he had no equal, especially when the boy resorted to the help of the Sharingan. But the only thing Sasuke did not want to give him was a name. Sakura suggested Naruto or Itachi, but in response only received a confident refusal. The memory of these people was too intimate, something hidden that belonged only to him. Go home. The gaze of multicolored eyes once again rested on the name carved in granite. Sasuke did not fully know why, but every time he returned to them. He had dinner with his wife and son, hugged Sakura and kissed her before bed. I'll be there soon. Maybe he was just tired of being alone. The rain stops, but instead the wind picks up. The fallen leaves fly all over the cemetery, creating a bizarre fiery dance. And in the center of this small hurricane stands only one man. I've never liked autumn. It reminds me that change is inevitable. The hem of his black cloak slid across the wet tiles. But it was you who taught me to appreciate every moment of life. To move forward, no matter what. Sasuke froze at the exit and turned around, thinking for a moment. Thank you, Naruto. Capital of the Land of Fire. 3 years after the death of Uzumaki Naruto. The food was delicious, but it just wouldn't go down. The nausea that was creeping up on her was skillfully hidden behind a modest smile. Even someone like her, after all the losses, had learned to wear a mask in public. The small talk had been going on for an hour, people exchanging news and feigning cordiality. The nobility had never liked shinobi, but without them, their power was transformed from absolute into something abstract, weightless. Some received protection, paid with support in many endeavors. Others simply followed the old agreement made by the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. All for the sake of a world without wars. Hinata swallowed another bite, and winced for a second. She missed the game she had caught during the mission stop. The spring water and the whole world that lay before her eyes. She had entered into her inheritance rights, and in a month she would become the full head of her clan. She had become the one her brother Neji had spoken of so often, and what she herself had been afraid of. A bird in a golden cage. With each passing year, realizing that the possibility of escaping into freedom was becoming more and more illusory. I heard that your beautiful daughter is preparing for an engagement? The daimyo, a thin, tall man, raised his dark eyebrows, feigning disappointment mixed with a question. It's such a pity that the Hyuga family does not support outside marriages. I think Hinataheim would fit in well with the ruling class. Perhaps. Hayashi took a sip from a glass of water, which he preferred more than intoxicating wine. Tobacco and alcohol were among the strictest taboos for him, because the body and mind of a shinobi are his instrument and main weapon. And it must always be clean from slowly killing poisons and crystal clear, not clouded by the veil of alcohol. But our foundations and traditions were built over many decades. Our ancestors were very concerned about the purity of blood. I understand that a Kakagenkai is not something to be wasted. The daimyo nodded, agreeing with the current leader's argument, but his swamp eyes still clung to the girl's figure at the other end of the table. Yes, she could be a great match for his son, give him strong heirs. Tie the shinobi even more closely to the nobility, not for their own safety. For the benefits that it promised. But we have strayed from the topic of our conversation. Why didn't you directly contact the Hokage? Old Hyuga looked closely at the face of the ruler of fire, seeing through him almost. Seeing that greedy gleam in his eyes that appeared when he saw his daughter. But not lust, no, the daimyo had more than enough women, despite his only official wife. But something else, deeper, hidden, but no less desirable. It's not for me to tell you, Chief, that some things are not worth knowing. The Lord lazily stirred the salad with a fork. It's better to hire a shinobi incognito. Especially since your family has proven its loyalty not only to Konoha, but to the entire land of fire more than once. I can trust you, can't I, Hayashi-san? Of course. Hyuga nodded reservedly, accepting such flattering comments about his clan. They were pleasant, but the old shinobi knew how sweet words could lull vigilance. He glanced briefly at his daughter, hoping that she had not relaxed at the sight of the luxurious food and the atmosphere that inspired trust. Hinata was clearly not interested in what was happening. But nevertheless, my visit to you, my people leaving the leaf for no apparent reason, all this will arouse suspicion. Yes, most likely. The daimyo sighed heavily, agreeing with his interlocutor's words. It was much easier to work with Uzumaki Naruto. What, excuse me? Hinata perked up, looking up from her food. Her gaze finally became meaningful. In the last months of his life, he took on any work I assigned him. The man explained. Apparently, the war had too much of an impact on the boy, since he didn't hesitate to get his hands dirty. I don't believe it. Hinata clenched her fists tightly, her nails digging into skin that was too soft for a shinobi. She had become stunted, domesticated, forgotten what full-fledged training was behind all the social gatherings and paperwork. She had been running from her fate all her life, and in the end she couldn't hide. And now the image that gave her strength in difficult times, the image that stood before her eyes when the goals seemed impossible, were they trying to break it? No need to tarnish Naruto-kun's memory. He was one of the kindest and most caring people I've ever known. Hinata, don't forget who you're talking to. Hayashi raised his voice, but his eyes were wide open. Surprise was intertwined with indignation, the calm atmosphere was shattered. I'm fed up with this talk. The girl answered a minute later, wiping her hands with a napkin. Don't expect an apology, Daimyo-sama, you don't deserve it. Ho? I'll pretend I didn't hear anything, child. At your age, it's natural to be led by your feelings. You can do whatever you want. Hinata bowed her head, and when she looked at the men again, the veins around her eyes bulged. They say that the Byakugan sees much more than it is officially credited with. The ruler of fire was convinced of this for sure. The girl opposite him saw everything secret. The Hyuga clan will soon stand under my command, and we will immediately take a neutral position towards the nobility. Hinata headed for the exit, and her trusted guards couldn't even block her way. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. Deceptively fragile fingers touched the handle, but did not turn it. The girl glanced over her shoulder. Shinobi have looked back at your opinion for too long. Everyone has forgotten how things were before the founding of the hidden villages. When clan wars were going on, Hinata looked at her father with a long, unblinking gaze. She thought that she had resigned herself and was able to forget, to erase Naruto from her life. To escape from the past, accepting her fate. But all this was just a lie, hiding the girl's true desires. There will be no engagement, I am breaking it off. The door behind her slammed shut, leaving the men in silence. Naruto-kun, I almost forgot what I always wanted. I almost gave up on my dream of being free. But even in death, you give me strength and faith in myself. Thank you for everything. Chapter 9 Uzumaki. This voice sounded on the edge of consciousness. Quiet, like the rustling of leaves. But it felt like power and strength, wisdom and age. It simply could not belong to an ordinary person. And what was a person to do in his personal hell? The darkness around him was squeezing him like a vice. He even forgot how to breathe. Sounds became something like a dream, because even the beating of his own heart was inaudible. This place was absolutely empty, deprived of everything. A prison or punishment for all the things he had done in the last months of his life. He had turned from the path, compromised his principles, washed himself in the blood of people he did not even know. So much of it had spilled that even his once fair hair had acquired a scarlet color. What? His fingers touched his head, and for the first time in a long time he felt something. The red color did not remain on his skin, it did not stick. This shade became familiar. Why do you resist fate so much? This time the voice was closer, louder, more thoughtful. The questioner was clearly trying to comprehend the dilemma, because for him such things had always been obvious. Everyone has a purpose and everyone must follow this path to the very end, without turning, without running away. But now he was faced with someone who was destroying all established norms, a boy. Where am I? The identity of the interlocutor was not important to him. The main thing was to find out where you are. To understand how to find a gap. To do everything to get out. This is what life taught him. Secondary factors faded into the background, they prevented him from overcoming the obstacle. Pragmatism became an integral part of his character. The war and countless deaths turned a naive boy into a real shinobi. But it was worth forcing a dialogue for the sake of information. And who are you? A thoughtful silence. It was oppressive because the passage of time here was immeasurable. Minutes turned into hours, then days. Or maybe only a few seconds passed. What have you gotten yourself into again, Naruto? Not your name. Reborn too many times, lost true memory and purpose. Deceived, burdened with other people's ideals. Let me show you the truth. Images and pictures burst into consciousness, tearing the head apart. Too many other people's emotions and memories that fill and displace their own. The personality of Naruto Uzumaki becomes something blurred, non-existent. He was never him, another mask on the face of the true owner. Kuro. A strange name for a teenager with no past. It doesn't reflect anything about him, kind and cheerful. Caring towards his brothers, loving his father. But Hagoromo saw only impenetrable darkness inside the boy, waiting for its time. That's why he named his adopted child that. He distorted his personality beyond recognition, created false memories and gave him a family. Also that this child would not follow the intended path. Also that he would not learn the nature of his origin. After all, he was the last will of a deceived and sealed beast, his flesh and the remains of his chakra. Now you understand, a chill blew, the voice of the creature made his whole body shiver. But Kuro did not feel fear, these were echoes of someone else's personality that had not completely dissolved, looking for a loophole to freedom. Stubbornness was in their blood. This world must be reborn for its own good. Stop running from fate already. Tree. Yes, his head bowed in humility, but a faint smile touched his lips. He remembered what his creator had intended, but also his brothers, even if they were enemies. His father's sincere smile, behind which there was anxiety. His first love and his children. His clan. Everything for which he refused to destroy, even when after Hagoromo's death the power of the Rinnegan weakened and the seals collapsed. Chakra has corrupted people and will lead to the destruction of their entire race if it is not stopped. There is not much time left. He felt the wind on his skin. Warm, soft, like a blanket. He wanted to sleep, but with his last effort, Kuro did what was necessary. He gave control to the one who had almost disappeared, because in order to achieve his goal, Naruto Uzumaki must exist. It's time to wake up, Naruto. Sweat runs down my face, blurring my vision. The sheet sticks unpleasantly to my body, despite the fact that the room is at a fairly comfortable temperature at night. This dream was very strange, also vague, like the others before it, but not as much. And the words stuck in my memory better. Naruto sat up on the bed and swung his legs over the side. His fingers slowly massaged his temples as a slight migraine began to make itself felt. The voice that chilled his blood still echoed in his head. It seems the damn cat didn't lie. The blow hit the wall next to the nightstand. A fine web of cracks spread in different directions, drops of blood fell onto the floor. He didn't feel like sleeping anymore, and there were several hours until dawn. Having gone into the shower, Naruto froze in front of the mirror. Approaching the reflection, he ran his hand through his hair. Scarlet strands appeared among them.